Hello everybody, welcome to today's IEP Live Learn Lunch. We're joined today by Mistry from Youth Employment UK, who's going to be talking us through their Youth Voice Census, and we'll be focusing on your future workforce, what they want you to know. So with no further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Lauren. Welcome, Lauren. Oh, I bet you, Lauren is, oh, there you go, I can see you.
Hello everyone, I am Lauren Mistry. I am Youth Employment UK's Director of Impact, Strategy and Communications, which is a big title and they make it bigger every year, I think, so I have more things to do. I'm just going to pull up a slide deck here, but thank you all for joining us. And Andrea, I am live from Kettering today too, so Northamptonshire. We must be neighbours somewhere along the line, so you in particular are really welcome here today. For those of you that don't know a lot about Youth Employment UK, we are an independent, not-for-profit social enterprise founded in 2012 to tackle youth unemployment, which is a big ambition, and you'll hear all today about our big ambitious ways that we work at Youth Employment UK, but really put ourselves at the centre of kind of the youth employment and youth unemployment complex landscape. We support young people with online digital services, information and content to empower them and to give them knowledge and information on skills and the ways they can develop. We also support employers to be more youth friendly, and we also support teachers, careers leaders, employability professionals across the space. Those are really working to support young people with not just free programs, but with, you know, with connections with insight and support too. Every year, for my sins, I run Youth Employment UK's Youth Voice Census. The Youth Voice Census is a really ambitious and powerful survey that we send out to young people aged 14 to 24. In the reality, the Youth Voice Census is about 220 questions in its entirety. Don't worry, not every young person has to answer 220 questions to have their voice heard. But we cover all of the interactions across education, employment, and those stages of looking for work for 14 to 24-year-olds. So depending on where they are in their journey, they'll answer a different set of questions to really gain insight. It's kind of to who they are, to their journey, to what's working for them, and to what isn't too. The Youth Voice Census 2021 was the fourth Youth Voice Census that we've done and was the largest response rate we've had so far. Over 3,400 young people gave us the privilege of sharing their voice on a number of issues. And we really do cover a number of issues. I'm going to talk to you about the report structure in a second. It really is massive. If you, I think that you're told to put your phones away, but if you do have it on, you can get your camera out, and this fancy QR code will allow you to see the Youth Voice Census in all of its entirety. The survey for 2021 went live on the 29th of March and it closed across the 1st of June too. So just to put some of this in context, it's still a COVID heavy response. It was around about the time that schools were open, but actually there were bubbles and there were closures and there were, you know, there were you know, work from home orders, and actually it might be okay to go in, and you know, and the job centre might have been open, it might not too. So it's still an area of kind of ambiguity and uncertainty, and as not a political organisation, we won't talk about how that is still the case today, but we'll get there too. The Youth Voice Census is 106 pages in its entirety. So what we've done to make it helpful and handy for everyone is split it up into different sections. We ask all young people a series of place-based questions that ask people about how they felt about where they lived, how they felt about the opportunities available to them, how their local authorities had handled COVID. You know, some real questions that centred around security, transport, real localised information to get a view of young people across the UK. And then depending on the age and stage of young people, we split the census into 3 sections too. So we have a preparing for your future section, which covers all young people within education up to university. We have a journey to work section, which covers all of those looking for work, and those that might not yet be ready to be looking for work but weren't in work and weren't in education at the moment too. And then we had a series of questions for those in work. Those in work, we did have questions that covered apprenticeships, traineeships, kickstart opportunities, and restart opportunities, as well as T-levels opportunities too. So it does cover a full breadth of young people in all of their stages and information. What we found from the Youth Voice Census was pretty overwhelming. The Youth Voice Census was weighted to be representative of young people across the UK. That doesn't mean that there aren't local and regional disparities in information, but actually these key findings were kind of set across all young people, that wherever they lived, wherever they were, they had growing mental health concerns. There was a sense of missing out and needing to catch up. Young people were really concerned about being able to access quality work where they lived, and also they didn't feel there was kind of a space or a place for themselves too. So if we look at kind of growing mental health concerns first, however I split the data for young people, whether I did it across race, ethnicity, age, gender, location, any ways that I split the data, anxiety, depression, and mental health concerns were in the top 5 reasons why young people in education, looking for work, and those thought that their barriers in terms of accessing work or progressing to their next stage were going to be. They really felt as though the anxiety, depression, and mental health concerns, and not all of those as one group, but actually individually too. We asked young people to highlight their top 5 barriers, and for every young person, those 3 were pretty much exclusively within there too. There's more to explore around barriers that we won't be able to get into today. We saw also that kind of a lack of contacts, a lack of work experience, and for our Black, African and Caribbean respondents, racial discrimination was still very much a top barrier that they felt was stopping them from accessing a good quality opportunity too. So it's not exclusively around mental health concerns, but it's really important. It's there for them. And in addition, only 23% of young people thought they could access support for their mental health, anxiety and depression issues that they had locally too. What we know from the Youth Voice Census is that for those that had a support structure around them, so for those within education and for those who were in work, they felt the disruption, absolutely, we all did, but they recovered quicker. They talked about kind of the resilience they'd had to find, but actually when they were able to give their employer time to respond, or the education setting that they were in time to respond, it was okay. There was kind of some constant changes, but they felt secure within that structure as time changed. But it was those that weren't in education, those that weren't in employment, those looking for work, or those out of that support system that suffered most. Through our response rates, just under 27% had lost a job because of coronavirus. But actually, for those that hadn't lost a job and were just looking for work at that time, they really felt the impact of COVID on their mental health. They felt it impacted their motivation to find work. They felt it impacted their mental health, and it left them in a position of kind of not really knowing what to do, not really knowing where to go. And that uncertainty and anxiety was really real for those young people too. Of course, those in work, they struggled with their well-being, and particularly young people in work, they felt like they had to keep learning how to learn. When we look at those in work, those who'd started work in this period, that sense of loneliness, kind of isolation, not getting any of that sense of what the workplace is like. Sandra in accounts, is she friendly? Is she just funny? When she emails me, I'm not really sure what to do. I'm not sure if these team emails are speaking directly to me or if they're not. There's a lot of young people are missing out on kind of context and learning and training within that environment too. So there's a real disruption across those areas. When we think about young people and what those mental health concerns were, a lot of it was the unknown, not just the unknown of what was going to happen next in coronavirus, because we still don't know, but actually, what it might mean, what long-term impacts this might have, and how they can tackle their next stages and who they can go to for help and support, particularly in the situation where it is all online. People were really anxious and concerned about having to sort of ring someone up or schedule their own Zoom sessions, and they can't just walk into somewhere. Some of that face-to-face stuff really helped, particularly those looking for work, to gain confidence and being able to talk to people and being able to establish what their next steps might be. And that plays into the second key finding about catching up. This isn't a moment in time to talk about catching up on all of the education that was missed. Actually, young people missed a lot more than that. They told us about how coronavirus had impacted their friendships, their family, their work, the connections with kind of careers advisors or work coaches or job centre people. There was a moment in time where they'd built connections, they'd built relationships, and actually it was taken away for 2 years, essentially. They'd also missed key life moments too. The number of young people that told us they missed exams spoke to a younger me that was like, sounded like the dream, but it wasn't. They really did miss that opportunity to go through that process of having to be resilient, of sort of that pressured environment of going through exams too. They missed leaver celebrations, sports, hobbies, festivals, first jobs, first dates, and they'd started these new learning and work environments all online too. Young people remained adaptable. A lot of them talked about how coronavirus had helped them to be resilient, but they did miss out on those big key life moments, which teach young people skills too, in an age where Saturday jobs aren't really a thing or a possibility for a lot of young people. But actually coronavirus left out a lot of working relationships, a lot of working kind of tests for young people, but actually those other ways young people develop skills through being leaders of their sports team, or setting up events, or going to their first festival and planning things, they also missed out on too. So they really did feel that sense of not really knowing what to do next, and how to make it work, and really worryingly not sure how they're going to answer these interview questions that we keep asking about. Tell us about a time when, because young people that haven't worked don't have those other experiences around them to support that too. When we look about kind of catching up as well, young people in education, and this specifically talked to those young people in school, only 42%, just over, had access to a secondary school, had access to a careers advisor in secondary school. Actually, this access to a careers advisor got worse the further young people got through education too. Those in college, those in university in particular, really suffered across the last year in terms of being able to access support and careers advice and information too. And I know whilst we aren't necessarily talking about school age people for some of the work that you'll individually do, I think it's really important to consider the journey travelled for young people, particularly those impacted throughout the last 2 years or so. Some of those interactions and conversations may have happened, might not have happened, but they might have happened online. They might have happened in a time and a space where young people just felt like they were just trying to get through the day rather than thinking about their career in a world where you weren't allowed outside. It's quite a lot to, it was quite a lot to establish. And across the last year, only 37.5% of young people had access to work experience too. Some online and some not, but again, work experience trailed off the closer you got to work, the older you got to. So in college and university, again, you had less access to any of those interactions. We talk a little bit about kind of the choices that young people aren't hearing about too. Whilst we're hearing more young people have apprenticeships taught to them and had more interactions with apprenticeships, traineeships, T-levels, being able to access the job centre, being able to access other employability services isn't discussed with young people. We kind of still very much talk about traditional routes for what's next, but there's no, I'm going to call it crisis planning, but I don't think that's the word that I mean, but there's no options to think about other routes, and there's not that kind of support network of actually, if you do go into an apprenticeship and you leave because it's not right for you, then what can you do? We kind of really kind of push the one route and nothing else either. It is quite a challenge. For those within university, out of all of those in education, those in university were the unhappiest of any of those in education. They really felt as though coronavirus had impacted their work experience, their interactions with employers, the value for money was dire in terms of what young people thought about it, and very few of them recognised any career support available within their university. And I'm always really cautious of this, because it's not to say that it isn't there, it's that it's not recognised and people aren't accessing it and they aren't using it, and it doesn't feel as though that's a purposeful choice of theirs, but it's them knowing that it's for them, that they can access it and that they can use it too. There's always an element of caution with those in university, because obviously it's the only education that you pay for within this system, so of course value for money has a different connotation in that environment too, but those in the university were really unhappy with how it was preparing them for their next steps and their future too. We always asking people about volunteering, social action and extracurricular activities as well, as a way of understanding from young people how else they can develop their skills and opportunities. And there were real disparities for which volunteering and social action opportunities young people access to. So unfortunately, we still live in a world where you know, boys chose sports clubs and young women chose arts, and you know, they're more likely to pick an arts or a music opportunity. But those young people who were eligible for free school meals or had additional needs were at least 10 to 20% less likely to have accessed any extracurricular support, but in particular things like the Duke of Edinburgh Award and kind of sports clubs and NCS services too. The only things that young people who were eligible for free school meals were more likely to do than any other was to join a youth club. It really did build a picture of where we're guiding young people, or where they're gaining access to information too. It was really hard for them to know where to go and what to be able to use. One of our biggest findings from the Youth Voice Census was around young people feeling they could access quality work where they lived. Only 9.9% of young people were confident they could find quality work where they live. Now, we do a lot of work at Youth Employment UK to kind of put some definitions around quality work, which we won't have time to fully go into today. But it's a hugely important factor for young people. And when we look at what goes into that, it's hugely powerful to establish where it looks in those areas too. So we think about preparing young people to access quality work. We look first for those in school. 33% of young people in the education system still think they understand the skills employers were looking for. Now, when you read the full Youth Voice Census, you'll find out there's loads of different nuggets to take from within there. Because then we asked young people what skills they thought employers were looking for, and they told us, and then we asked them what skills they thought they had, and they told us those too. And there's massive disparity. Even though young people think they know the skills employers are looking for, they still can't quite join the dots in terms of how they develop them, how they get there. It still feels like an unreachable unknown for a lot of young people too. And it did increase, the confidence in knowing what skills employers look for did increase. The older young people got, 55% of those 19 plus thought they understood the skills employers were looking for, but it didn't change the fact the skills they had or said they had weren't those same things too. And for young people, there was a lot to consider in terms of being able to prepare for accessing work too. And people are absolutely terrified of assessment centres. We've heard about the anxiety and the depression, but when people didn't feel confident that they knew what was going to happen to them in an assessment centre, and they also just, they really felt as though it wasn't a place where they could shine or be able to do it too. They were least confident that they had the knowledge to be able to prepare for it, with just around 29% agreeing or strongly agreeing that they could access that work too. Those who were eligible for free school meals, those with additional needs, were at least 10% less likely to feel prepared for anything too. We think about the CV workshops that have run over the years, interview skills, cover letters. Young people are still not confident that they can do those things too. There's still not sure that they're able, you know, that they really get it, that they really understand it, that they can really put it into practice too. And in particular, and of real importance to young people, so they're not confident they had a good network around them to be able to access work and to be able to thrive in a working environment too. We talked about earlier, 9.9% of young people were confident that they would find quality work where they lived. And actually confidence in being able to find quality work declined with age, which is really worrying. 50% of those aged 16, 18 and 19 were confident that they'd be able to do it. But actually, by the time you got to 21, only 63% weren't confident of those aged 21 plus they'd be able to find quality work where they lived. Actually, the older you get, the more you get out into the environment, the less you're going to be able to find a quality job, which is really concerning. 25% of young people thought employers were supportive of hiring them. And actually, young women, Black, African, Black, British and Caribbean young people were least likely to be confident of this, which was really interesting because throughout the census, young women and those of Black, African, Black, British and Caribbean origin were really confident that they had great skills, they had, you know, higher aspirations perhaps than some of the other racial and ethnic groups in there. But actually, as soon as we switched the conversation to finding a job, to employers wanting to hire you, confidence plummeted for those young people too. And it kind of really concerning that for those in education, you know, really confident, really working, and perhaps there's movement, perhaps there's change as those young people access the work, but for those who are actively looking for work at the moment, who are young women or of Black African, Black British Caribbean descent, I really don't think that employers are supportive of hiring them in any way. What we did find is for those in work, that it was more positive. They were our happiest group, and in particular those in apprenticeships were our happiest group too. I do have to caveat that with Youth Employment UK is home to the youth-friendly employer mark. We are here and champions of young people and of employers who support them too. So some of that work will have rubbed off in this area, but you know, there's a real opportunity to speak to young people about the value of work. Young people are ambitious, they want to thrive in a working environment, and if we can find the right opportunities and connect those dots, it really can work for them too. I always have to take a point and a moment to say that whilst we talk about apprentices being the happiest, there is still a long-standing issue with the pay of apprenticeships too, which I'd be remiss not to mention across those areas. But young people thought they were trained well, they had opportunities for progression, that they were, you know, that they were important in the jobs that they did too. So if we can close some of these gaps, if we can show young people that there are, you know, finding quality work has that success, it's a really powerful position to be in. And finally, the Youth Voice Census and our last finding talks about a space for young people and a place for their voice too. Almost 82% of young people did not think there are enough opportunities to share their views on important issues in their area. And this census, you know, this spoke throughout the census too. It's my role and privilege and responsibility to analyse the findings, to do all of the clever numbers, all of the weighting of the Youth Voice Census, but also to read all of the responses that young people took the time to share with us too. And more so than ever this year, at the end of the Youth Voice Census, we asked young people if there's anything else they wanted to tell us. And sometimes we get weird and wonderful things in there. But actually this year, the majority of young people told us that they really hope this made a difference, and that actually them sharing their voice could change something, could make a difference for other young people too. And actually, we really take that and drive that forward at Youth Employment UK. It's a really important privilege of ours to be able to do that. But when people really kind of fail to recognise that they can have a voice and they can share it. We talk about space for young people. There's a real element in here of young people not really recognising that services were designed for them. Of those young people who were not in education, employment or training, but were looking for opportunities, only 37.7% of young people had engaged with Job Centre Plus services. And actually, for the majority of those, it's because they thought that weren't applicable to them. You know, they confidently wrote in the question box that actually the job centre is only where you get money, they don't help you get a job. And the clue's in the name. But, you know, we talk about the job centre because it's a known thing that young people can use, but it's the same for other services that young people engage with too. They don't always recognise that services are designed for them, not always designed with them, and perhaps that's the key to change. But people don't realise that these services are for them, and it can help them, and you can go and get CV workshops and do interview skills and interview practices there too. But if people don't recognise it, they don't use it. They're excluding themselves from a situation that they can't access. For those in education, and it's my kind of final point of the census. I'll cover a few more points, and then we can open up for questions at the end. But you know, 27% of young people did not have a quiet place to do their schoolwork. We asked this question too, and actually for those looking for work and for those who are out of work, they were less likely to have a quiet space to be able to apply for jobs or do training or do their work. And 67% of young people share their device with more than one person. So actually, if a young person was in that environment and looking for work, or within education too, they're reliant on their guardian or whoever they live with to be able to kind of support that device and to be able to have the data to access and get the support for that too, which isn't always fair, and it isn't always shared across those areas either. I wanted to finish on just some kind of final reflections about what that really means and how we can help and support young people. It's clearer than ever for us at Youth Employment UK that young people really are ambitious. They do want to thrive, but actually they don't always know where they want to work or what they want to do. And we are, you know, the systems set up around them try and encourage them to make those big decisions earlier. And people know they want to work, they can understand some of the, you know, they understand the concept of it, they can understand some of the skills that they have, but not all of them. And we're still in that situation where young people don't fully understand what's happening to them, what skills they have, and how they can make it work too. So no, we have come up with free products and services for young people to help and support and give them agency in that area, and to support those career leaders, employability professionals, parents, and those around young people to be able to support that too. We run a free young professional program, which is all online learning and support that young people can access. But we also kind of champion and support. We listen to the fears of young people through our Youth Voice Census, and we share that kind of digitally on our online services, make sure young people know that there's a space and a place for them to be able to do that. We run an ambassador program with young people where they can share their voice. We share not just the Youth Voice Census, but the voices, and allow our ambassadors to speak for us at events and information, and to speak for us in the ministerial meetings that we have with different government departments responsible for changing some of the systems and structures around it too. And finally, we support employers to I'm going to say do better, but actually recognise where they are doing well and how they can talk and translate that to young people too. But for sure, help some employers do better by young people as well. You know, some of those unknown barriers are still in place for young people too. So I'm going to stop sharing my slide. I'm going to let my big face take up the screen, and I'm really happy to start working through some of the questions now. So Helen,
so I'm back. I am here as I promised. So we do have a question that has come in from John. Thank you, John. John is at Action West in London. I mean, he said, what did young people say about remote support compared to face-to-face support?
Thanks, John. At the time this Youth Voice Census was live, it was sort of changing, and at that time, young people's biggest concern was having to relearn how to do everything each time. So for those in education, for those seeking support, for those in work, it was that, oh my gosh, it's changed again, and I have to relearn how to do this, and I have to be able to work this way. So at the point in time that this happened, it was really about changing the parameters for young people each and every time, and actually us as busy professionals, as busy employers, as busy people supporting them, we expected young people to be able to catch up because we were under pressure from our employers too. So at the time, it was really about them understanding that it had changed and why it had changed and why they had to work differently. For those that had support systems around them and knew those people, they were more resilient to it. They knew they had someone they could talk to. But for those that were, I don't know, we're just kind of pick and mixing from different things, they really didn't feel supported. They really didn't feel like their work was their work was there. Once young people could kind of navigate the Zooms, the Microsoft Teams, the knowing they had to call people, they tended to be okay with it. But for young, I don't know, when you call young people, they're terrified of picking up the phone. It took a long time to get there, to build that trust that they were going to be able to do it too. So I think it's a really long-winded way, John, of saying that young people didn't necessarily have a preference to it, but that it could have been kinder to them to explain it, to make it clear, which was difficult in a situation where it was changing for us as people speaking to young people as well as them too.
I think there's been a little bit of an assumption that young people would just engage with tech, isn't there? And that they would all be really comfortable with Zoom and Teams and tech rather than face to face.
And we think as young people as these digitally native, and some are, and I do hate speaking about young people in this really homogenous group, but actually when we think about tech, we think young people can do anything and everything, but actually they used to being on their phone to kind of engage with perhaps social media, perhaps some of their games, not to have careers conversations, not to have employability conversations on there too. You know, even now we're interviewing for staff at the moment, and we're texting them. So actually, when you pick up the phone, invariably 9 out of 10 young people, all those kind of, I'm going to say under 30, don't pick it up. They let it go to voicemail because they want to know what it is and they want to know how it works. And, you know, we still get taught by our apprentices that, you know, they haven't used PowerPoint since, I don't know, 1998, it feels like, and it makes me feel really old too. So there's being digitally native and expecting them to just quickly adapt and respond, but it's not fair because they weren't in the environment in the first place to know what they're adapting and responding to. It's just a big new thing we put their way.
That's really interesting, isn't it? Yes. So Nigel has said, as a teacher delivering remotely, he found that he often felt like he was talking to an unattended device.
Yeah, I can feel that too. There's a real shift in I don't know, like what the world tells young people, and then actually how the processes and procedures work too. It's really difficult to be engaged on Zoom all of the time. Some of you have probably made a cup of tea, checked your emails, checked your phone, even though you weren't supposed to, because this didn't quite catch your attention, or perhaps you know, our brains work that way. We're given, you know, it can't all work for everyone, and young people want to feel like it's personal, like they're being taught, like it's teaching. It's really difficult to do that on a device when I can also be online shopping or checking out what my friends are doing or watching videos or doing something else as well. There's all this opportunity, there's all this exposure, and we want to go, oh, be digital, do all these things, have all these great skills, but also sit, listen, and let me talk at you to a screen, and all feel like this is a really personal lesson, but it's not. It is really challenging, and it is, as we know, really challenging to be engaged on Zoom or Microsoft Teams or any of the other services for that.
Yeah, definitely. And I would say, as someone who designs and delivers learning digitally, it's the design is so important, isn't it, to make sure it's interactive and people don't feel like they're being talked at, that they've still got that engagement and it's still personalized. And it's not as easy as just transferring things, is it? John said, you said a lot of young people weren't aware of the support available to them in their local area. Do you have any suggestions of how young people can be much better informed of support agencies, etc.?
It is a great question, John, and no silver bullet, but I think it's around there's a few layers to this too. So young people being more informed about the services. Again, it's like the impetus is on them to know all of these things. In education and in the careers advice they get and in the services, they're never taught how to access anything that's slightly different from going to the next educational route, or finding an apprenticeship or finding a job, we don't tell them about the other support systems, services around them. And most people in their lives will find themselves out of work or needing support or needing to access something, and it's never discussed. It's not monitored at the careers education level. I mean, and it's a really important part of young people knowing where to go next and what to do. We have to bring that conversation in, because, you know, failure will happen, or access to opportunities, or jobs will go, redundancies will happen, businesses will close. We don't really talk about working in the real world and how it works too. So we have to start increasing those conversations we have with young people. And I think in terms of what we can all practically do when we're supporting young people, I think there's a moment in time to say, this is the employability support I'm giving you right now, but actually here is the place you can go in the future. Here is the work you can do. So we do a lot of work, John, to make sure that that information's on our website. I think it can start across the education sector too, but I think sometimes the sector has to be a bit less selfish and go, look, there are huge amounts of support available to you too. And I think the more that we can design services with young people, the more we'll understand kind of the languages, the words they look for when they Google support and services around them, because it isn't employability support services, I can tell you that. You know, we have to, the more we can work with young people to design the services, to understand what they'd be called and how that worked, it would be, we would, one, have more young people engaged in what are great programs, but two, we'd understand a little bit more about the language they were talking and what they were looking for, because what we're creating, all of us, is really valuable and really important, but it's not always, it's lining that up with what young people think they need to search for and find out too.
That's really interesting, isn't it? And I know as employability professionals, we talk a lot about when we're putting together CVs, and doing searches for jobs, making sure you're using the right words in order to find them. But actually as well, it's making sure that the younger people, we understand what language, what are they going to look for, and make sure they can access that. John has said, thank you very much. Really interesting point. We could inform schools and FE careers people about support agencies much more than at present. Karen has said, referrals for non-attenders to school have increased since COVID in Norfolk. So, and Nigel has said, quite often this information is not shared through the whole staff and restricted to a few who don't always engage all the students. It would have been valuable to me when I was at school. It's really true, isn't it? I just think we all wish we'd have known, and hindsight is a beautiful thing as well, isn't it? We didn't quite know how this landscape was going to change, so we can sit back now and go, we could have, would have, should have done all of these things to help and support it. But you're right, often this information isn't shared, or it is, and it's on an email somewhere, it's printed out and laminated and stuck on a wall, but it's about having someone really invested that can go, you need this now, and you need to be able to support it. And perhaps it's around ensuring that this information lives on FE college websites too. And we think about young people, those that have just left education and find themselves in need of support, or out of work or out of next steps, and they're probably 6 months away from leaving college, they'll go back to their college website, or they'll go back and connect with them. But post that 6-month point, it becomes really difficult for young people. They start to see themselves as kind of othered and different from being able to go back to that college or education system. And when you Google career support, careers information, there's 8 billion responses out there too. So I think we have to kind of champion the really good websites, and I say that as an owner of one, but we do have to start being consistent about what our expectations are, and where good quality information and impartial advice and support is too, which we'd be really happy, obviously, for you to signpost that too. I was going to say, so yeah, well there's the next question then. So where should we be signposted to? Where, for everyone on today's session, where could they go back and say, here are some really good websites that you can trust? And I think that's a really important point, isn't it? It's that trusted information that we can be happy to share.
I mean, we take great pride in having an impartial website that speaks that speaks to young people. We are in the process of moving our website from 14 to 24 as it is at the moment to 11 to 30 to kind of capture some of that all age area. So I'm happy with the slides, which I know someone's asked for, to put some quick links onto the website too. But there are specific services for young people in different need points as well. So I'm really happy to share like a quick guide, if you like, to where to find good support for young people. In terms of, I noticed I didn't respond to Karen's point around non-returners to school increased in Norfolk, and I know Karen's got some more follow-up to that too, but I'm not sure I know what the question is to respond, but I don't want to ignore it.
Yeah, so yeah, I think it was a comment on it seeing an increase in a trend there. And she's also said that prospects work in Norfolk schools and colleges to signpost and support young people to the correct agencies. So it's great. Yeah, and she's just confirmed that. And it would be wonderful if it, we talked that people in the chat talking about action points. If one of the ones we could all take away from this is knowledge about where we can signpost to, or first steps, as we've said. So Lauren, if you don't mind, if you get the slides as a PDF to me, and what we can do is we can send them out to everyone who is has registered today. To share that information, that would be fantastic. And as you've said earlier, I did scan the QR code, and it's really, really easy to get to the report. I was a bit of a tech dinosaur with using QR codes. It took me a long time to get brave enough to, but they're so easy, aren't they, for us to do?
They really are. It's our apprentices make us put them on everything because apparently it makes it easier. So there's young people can teach us a lot. And I think in terms of kind of good action points too, whilst it might seem a silly and a small one, young people were really concerned about things like attending assessment centres, things like interviews still, and it can be really hard to getting people to engage in those programmes because everyone's terrified of talking about themselves, having to introduce themselves, having to do those things. But what we know from employers are that they will run them, and they will keep running them no matter how many people tell them they're not there too. And I think it's not forgetting some of those basics. I feel like CV workshops have been around forever, but they're still important. There's new batches of young people coming out, CVs do change, and I think it isn't throwing everything away, but it's remembering and reinvigorating some of those old processes too, particularly now. Young people are going to need more support around CVs and workshops and some of those assessment centres and being able to talk about themselves and writing about it, because they haven't had volunteering access, they haven't had social action, they haven't done the Duke of Edinburgh, and particularly those young people who are more at risk of becoming NEET won't have done any, or won't have known that they could access any of those support systems too. So they need the support that's slightly different from the stuff we've churned out for years about writing a CV. It's about how they can talk about their skills now when they haven't had any experience for 2 years.
I think that's a really interesting point, isn't it? And one of the things that we've been looking at the IEP is putting in support for all ages around how do you prepare for assessment centres or interviews when they're going to be done digitally, and these processes where, like you said, the older we get, and obviously myself, I'm older now, it's easy to think, oh, well, everyone knows this, but actually there's always young people coming through and they don't know it. So they do need our support with it. So revisiting those basics and making sure that they're available for people is key. It's one of the things that we can do. I think we've had all of the questions we've got at the moment, and what we will do for everyone who is here is when I send out the details, they'll be able to contact you direct if they have any specific questions. But I would say, have a look at the full report. Everything's in there, isn't it? It's a really interesting read. As you said, it is long, but it is well worth reading and digesting because it's there. Sarah's put, this is a great Facebook page. It's called Career Leaders UK. Are you aware of that, Lauren?
Yeah, we're very active members. So across Pete, who's our head of education and Youth Voice, and and it is a really, really good Facebook. There's great sources, but sometimes also some really scary questions, Sarah. I don't know if you'll agree, some really scary questions for people teaching careers advice that you're like, oh wow, okay, this is a great place for knowledge and insight, but it's fantastic. Really safe space to ask questions too.
Excellent, brilliant, thank you very much. So good share there then. We're getting lots of thank yous, and we've had a few people, we've had lots of messages requesting the slides, so we'll sort that out and we'll make sure we get them out to you. We'll get this recording up as soon as possible. So thank you very, very much, Lauren. It's been really, really interesting. Amy has said wonderful session, thank you. And several other people have said thank you as well. John's in there as well. So thank you very much for that. We will look forward, hopefully, to bringing you back after the next census. I always do this live so I can record people agreeing to do another one, so we can hold you to it.
No, absolutely, and that brings me, that is a great reminder too. We are in the question setting stage of the next Youth Voice Census too, so it will go live at the end of March, the next Youth Voice Census. So if you feel like something's missing, or if there's a question you just never feel gets asked about the sector and about the services, let us know and we'll see if we can include it this time.
That would be wonderful, thank you. And maybe we can bring you back for another LiveLearnLunch sometime where we can look at a little bit some of the things that young people do want from employability services, programs, and maybe some top tips on how we can sort of make sure our terminology is keying into that demographic and we're using similar language. Thank you very much, Lauren. Thank you everybody who has joined us today. This is the point where I normally do quickly tell you what we've got going on the next LiveLearnLunch. So do let you know what we have coming up next week. Now, I'm ashamed to say, because I've been on holiday, I can't remember off the top. I've still got holiday head. I can't remember off the top of my head who we have next week. That's terrible. It is the Digital College, and they are going to be presenting on the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on online training. So they've done some research into exactly what impact that's had on digital and online training, whether that's e-learning or sort of virtual classroom training. And then on the 9th of March, we have Learning Curve Group are joining us, and they're going to be doing a webinar around climate change. I'm really looking forward to that one. So please do come along if you can. If not, do be aware that on the IEP YouTube channel, we do share all of the recordings. So if you can't attend live, you can catch up with the session. So if you haven't already done so, pop over to our YouTube channel and hit subscribe, and then you'll always receive notifications whenever we upload a session. But thank you again, Lauren. It's been great to have you here, and thank you everyone for spending your lunch with us today. It's great to see you all. I'm going to stop the recording now. Thank you.